This week, we're talking trade. Welcome to the weekly Livestock Market update on Brownfield. I'm your host, Megan Grebner. Our program this week is brought to you by the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. CattleCon 2026 hits downtown Nashville February 3rd through the 5th. Join the cattle industry's biggest event for education, networking, and world-class entertainment. Register today at convention.ncba.org. With us this week is ag economist Josh Maples with Mississippi State University. Josh, it's great to see you.
Hey, Megan. Thanks for having me again.
Thanks for being here. I know football season is underway. It's kind of crazy in the sports world, but it's kind of a big time of year for farmers too as we're heading into harvest.
Absolutely. There's a lot of stuff moving right now. It's exciting times, and you saw me look this direction. I'm actually looking out at our football stadium right now. There's all kind of activity going over there. So we've been celebrating it being a burr month, finally.
A burr month and fall is in the air.
That's right.
All right, we'll get into that livestock and meat trade details coming up, but let's recap what happened this week in what is pretty atypical for us to talk about, a somewhat down market.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing as I was looking through my tables here. Pretty much everything was down this week. So live steer prices 242.59 for the 5 market average on Friday. This was down about $1 from a week ago, so not a big drop, but down about $1. Still up over $60 from where we were a year ago. October live cattle futures contract down 367 from a week ago to 242.59. And then the August feeder cattle futures price was down $5.14 per hundredweight on the week to 359.63. It's hard to say 359.63 and think about it being a down week, but still fell off a little bit from a week ago. Choice box beef cutout was at 411.05 at the end of this week. This was down $1.61 from last week. Cash hogs, switching over to the hog side, were down 36 cents to $100.44 per hundredweight. Lean hog futures were actually up a little bit, up $1.10 to $96.13 on the week. And then the pork cutout was also up slightly, up 38 cents from a week ago to $113.32 per hundredweight.
I think it's interesting. We're talking about, again, a lower week, but cash prices are $61 more than they were a year ago. And when we look at some of these prices on the future side of things, I feel like you have to pinch yourself a little bit, right? Like this isn't anything that the industry is used to dealing with.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really important, Megan, for when we look at these price levels. And certainly if you look at futures prices going off into next year, so if we think about some winter grazing that may be happening, or plans for winter grazing that may be happening, looking out ahead at what the market's offering you from a price risk management standpoint, even at these really high prices, you can have some really big moves. And so you don't want to get caught at the wrong time. So I always encourage producers, no matter what price levels are, is to consider risk management. But man, especially at these price levels, consider risk management and see if it fits your operation and what you're trying to do for your livestock.
Josh, when you take a look at a move like this and at these price levels, I'm assuming this isn't a big surprise that the market can't just continue to go on this up trajectory. At some point, it's got to take a breath, maybe take a step back. Is that kind of maybe a little bit of what we're seeing this week?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, we're just seeing volatility. Yeah, and a $5 move on feeder cattle, for example, if we were talking about a $5 move 5 years ago, that would be, a huge move, just because of where the price level was at that time. But a $5 move now relative to 360 feeder cattle is really percentage-wise not near as big of a move. But now if you are in the market, remember a $5 move is a $5 move. And so as the as the margin requirements, or your maintenance margin requirements, I should say. It's you can get smaller percentage wise moves, but it still has just the same impact on how margin accounts are moving at the end of every day. So really important again, just to kind of keep in context where the changes are relative to price levels, and then for producers out there to think about risk management.
Slaughter data for this week, obviously holiday shortened week, so we're running
Yep.
on a day less of activity. How are things shaping up on the cattle and hog side of things?
Yeah, so on the cattle side, for the shortened week, 487,000 head. This was down 78,000 head from a week ago, and then down about 61,000 head from where we were a year ago. On the hog side, slaughter was at 2.32 million head. This was down 63,000 head from where we were a week ago, and then down about 11,000 head from where we were a year ago. So still seeing some declines compared to where we were a year ago, especially on the cattle side with tighter supplies.
It's very interesting watching what we're doing day in and day out in comparison when we're looking year over year levels, even on the daily, from a daily perspective.
Yeah, it's some of these things when you're looking at the weekly change and not moving that much, but you kind of have to check yourself a little bit whenever you look at the change from where we were a year ago, and just huge movements, Megan. I mean, we've seen big movements in prices. We continue to see big differences in slaughter data, especially on cattle. Um, I think it's all just a testament to where we are and the point in this cycle. And I think it's really important to keep that in context that this is a cyclical industry on the cattle side and pork side as well. And so where we are right now is really what's driving these record prices that we're seeing on the cattle side.
All right, Josh, big reports out this week, or big set of data, a big set of data out this week, which would be trade data from the Economic Research Service. As you take a look and dig into that report, what are some of the things that you're taking away and are standing out?
Yeah, so I think, looking at, there's a lot to dig into here. And obviously, trade has been a really hot topic, uncertain topic. And then looking at some differences across countries. If we look at the big picture, let's start there. So, beef exports down about 18.6%, 211 million pounds of beef exports during July. This is continues the trend that we've been talking about all year. Whenever we've got really tight supplies of cattle here, tight supplies of beef here, we're just not exporting as much, and it's worth a lot here. Beef prices are really high, and so the combination of those two, and of course they're related, is really leading to some lower export totals. Flipping over to the import side, though, is a different story. Imports up 13% from July 2024 to 457 million pounds of beef imports. These are really big levels, really big totals. Some of the similar reasoning. Beef is worth a whole lot here, so really strong beef prices. We're not producing as much as we have been. So we're bringing in more. Most of it, again, is trim. We've talked about this before. Most of it is lean trim to mix with the really large steers and heifers that we're processing to mix with the fatty trimmings from those steers. And ground beef demand has continued to be really, really strong throughout this grilling season in particular. So there's a big pull of beef into the country, especially that trim piece there. If we look over at the pork side, Megan, pork exports down just under 3% to 552 million pounds. And then imports were up 2.5% to 96 million pounds on the pork side. So much smaller changes in percentage wise on the pork side than we're seeing overall on the beef side.
So let's dig into countries specifically. Do you want to start? You want to start with beef because I think there's two really interesting stories in both of those categories, both beef and pork.
Yeah, there are. And so let's start with beef, and let's just start with the one that, had the biggest change. Exports to beef exports to China, and you recall China has had become one of our larger beef export destinations. Uh, Exports to China down 94%, 93 or 94% from where we were a year ago. It went from being one of the top destinations to now it's just, in July of this year, it was 1% of our beef exports went to China. Uh, Big shift, and this is directly related to the trade negotiations that are going on with China right now. So hopefully, seeing some changes there in the future. Most of the exports, Japan, South Korea, again, were our primary destinations for beef exports, 26% to each of those. So just those two countries were over half of our beef exports. Mexico, Canada were third and fourth, 12% and 10% going to Mexico and Canada. So that was the big destination for our beef was going. If we flip over and see where the beef is coming from, our primary beef import our sources, I should say, Australia continued to be big here. So 26% of the imports that we brought in during July came from Australia, followed up by Canada, Brazil, Mexico, and New Zealand. Those were all in the 10 to 17% range. So Australia leading the way there. I do want to mention, I know we're talking mostly beef here, and we really only bring in cattle from Mexico and Canada, just for transportation reasons primarily. Cattle imports down 70% from where we were a year ago, and the obvious reason for this is the border closure. So if you look at Mexico in particular, down 96%. I assume the only reason it's not down 100% is because we did open the border, very briefly during July as part of what was going to be a phased reopening that was then shut down very quickly because of New World screwworm concerns again. But very few cattle coming in to the country from either Canada or Mexico. Again, down 70% from where we were a year ago.
When we're talking, and I know on the beef side of things, there's a conversation, and I preface this every time we get into it, whether we like it or not. This is just part of what makes our beef industry go. In terms of the tariff conversations, thinking about Brazil specifically, how much does the 301 investigation or the challenging and the conversations about tariffs with Brazil impact us potentially on the beef side of things when we're so short on trim and we're in need of it to meet that ground beef demand?
Yeah, it's really difficult to think about how this is exactly going to play out because anytime you see a disruption from any particular country, and obviously Brazil's a big one, um, the market is still going to pull in some lean trim somewhere somehow, whether it's from other countries or whether it's from cull cows here. Now there's not a lot of cull cows here to pull from, but prices are going to adjust and adjust higher whenever you lose a primary or a large source. So I think that's what we're seeing. I think we're going to see prices adjust higher. That's going to pull in, it's going to make it more advantageous for some other countries to export to us instead of maybe some other places that they were exporting. So I think we're going to see other countries fill the gap. I don't know how, and this is a question I've had for the second half of 2025 is I don't know how much more we can actually pull in from our own cull cows. They're just not out there. I get I'd like to think that some producers are trying to cull less, and we're seeing that in some of our beef cow slaughter data that we're just not processing as many cull cows. So we're going to get that lean trim from somewhere. We've got the ground beef demand. We've got the fatty trimmings coming off of our fed cattle. It's going to come from somewhere, Megan, is I've probably said 4 times now, but I'm not sure how much of that can actually happen domestically, just given the size of the herd that we're at right now.
All right, let's talk pork. um, Obviously, there is one rock star customer of U.S. pork who takes a lot of it. And it's not the same country that it has been for a lot of years.
That's right.
Thinking
Yes.
about the lack of purchases from China and other countries picking up the slack there.
Yeah, exactly. Looking at on the pork side, Mexico, largest destination for pork exports at 38% of the total. Japan, South Korea were next at 15 and then 9% of the total, respectively. If we look at, I had those numbers in front of me right here. I'm going to get them pulled up. Look at China in particular. Our exports to China made up about 5% of our total exports. I think that would put it as either fifth or sixth ranking. Exports to China is down about 17% from where we were a year ago. So we're seeing some disruptions there on the pork side as well. Flipping over to the import side, Canada was our primary import source for pork imports. 59% of our total imports for pork came from Canada during July. Mexico, Brazil, and Denmark, they were next in that 7 to 9% range, respectively. So look at the live animal side just really quickly. Hog imports, Canada is the source there. Was actually up 15% from where we were a year ago. So 621,000 head of hogs imported during the month of July. So this is interesting dynamics, Megan. Quite different from what we're seeing on the beef side in a lot of ways, but we are seeing some similarities in terms of how the trade structure is affecting both industries.
Josh, I think this report is such a great snapshot of what our trade relationships and the important role that having market access plays in profitability, in pricing, and that whole economic structure of the livestock sector.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I take away from this, Megan, is just how quickly things can shift. I think sometimes you think about how long it takes to build these trade relationships. But ultimately, the market, and by the market, I mean the cost of getting a particular product to a particular customer is going to drive where we're sending beef to and where we're sourcing beef, pork, sending beef and pork to and sourcing beef and pork from. So I think a report like this can really show just how quickly really we can see shifting trade flows given changes in trade structure.
I think also the important role that groups like the U.S. Meat Export Federation and how checkoff dollars are used to increase and grow market demand and the important role that those play as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Looking at any sort of, and those groups do a fantastic job in any sort of additional market access or just tweaks to market access that make it more advantageous can have really big impacts on the amount of beef and pork that we're able to export in particular.
All right, before I let you out of here today, supply and demand numbers are out next week. The last time we had this report, massive corn crop, which obviously bodes well for livestock producers on the input side of things. What are some other things you're watching for in next week's report?
I'm really interested in what the beef production and pork production numbers are going to look like. If you think back to the last report, we saw both of those forecasts for 2026 lowered. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch that number. And I know we're really early on. You typically see a ton of movement in that forecast from now through the end of next year. But I'm really watching in particular that beef production forecast as we try to make sense of the data that's coming in. We had a cattle on feed report a couple of weeks ago that I don't want to say was surprising, but it was a bit of, to a certain extent, where are these cattle coming from? And so I want to see how that's going to play out in terms of what we're expecting for beef production, not only this year, but for next year. And we try to get a handle on what this herd size is.
And that next cattle on feed report is just around the corner as well.
That's right. Yep. It is a really, folks like me, we enjoy looking at these reports all the time, but truly these reports that we're getting right now are really fascinating because we're seeing so much movement in so many of them nearly every month. It really makes it interesting to see how things are moving and try to make sense of what that means for the future.
Josh, it's great to see you.
Thank you, Megan.
To have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box every Saturday, go to brownfieldagnews.com. You can also submit questions and comments. And for market updates twice daily, make sure to check out our Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Megan Grebner for Brownfield.